All right, so thank you everybody for the opportunity to talk today. So I'm going to be talking about how at Oaken we're using AI to transform the way in which we diagnose diseases. Don't take too many pictures of this slide because I'm realizing there's the wrong date on the first slide. So basically our mission at Oaken is to use AI to help discover and develop better treatments for unmet medical needs. And we are focused currently on oncology, but obviously this mission can be extended to other therapeutic areas. So we are a young company. So we were co-founded about 6 years ago by Thomas Clausel, who's our CEO, who's an assistant professor in clinical oncology, as well as Gilles, who was a professor and PI in machine learning in academia. And basically, I think what they've been really good at is building an interdisciplinary team to tackle these problems. So we really built a team of about 150 people, including several PhDs, over 30 located in France, the UK, the US, and Switzerland. And what's important with this team is that it combines data scientists with software engineers and especially also medical, clinical, and now biology experts. And importantly as well, we've built a network of about 170 KOLs, so key opinion leaders, top clinicians, that we regularly interact with to stress test our hypotheses and to collaborate with on our research projects. In fact, about all of the R&D that we do is in collaboration with academic institutions. Basically, our company offers an end-to-end AI-powered precision medicine solution, we could call it a platform, and the idea is to go directly from patient data circling back to patient outcomes. So the first brick of this was getting access to patient data. So for artificial intelligence, obviously the first thing that you need is access to data. And as some of you may know, access to healthcare data is actually a relatively complicated, highly regulated, and very complex to navigate. So we built specific technology and specific ways of working to allow us to get access to that data, in particular privacy-preserving computational methods to process this data and gain the trust of the academic institutions that we were working with. And then we work on multimodal data, so with several modalities, and I think that this is also something that was very important, is to basically be able to investigate directly patient data to be able to make that research efficient. A lot of biomedical research today is, in the past, has been based on models of diseases, so whether they are cell lines or animal models. And in fact, research derived directly from patient data has been less developed, and what we're seeing in the field in general and in our company as well is the development of R&D that is really focused directly on patient data and not only on animal or cell line models that simulate what the disease actually looks like. And then finally, we also work on deploying these solutions directly in the healthcare setting. So you might be wondering what all of this has to do with diagnostics. So just to give you an overview of what's going on in cancer in particular, but this is also the case for several other multifactorial diseases, is that we actually don't have a full picture of what's going on in patients. And this is because there's actually a lot of heterogeneity, not only between various types of cancers, so breast cancer is different from colon cancer, obviously, but also within a particular type of cancer. So one breast cancer patient is not going to have the same diseases as another breast cancer patient. In fact, there's actually also even tumoral heterogeneity. So these patients actually have highly complex tumors individually. So all of this heterogeneity is also compounded by the fact that there are natural differences between patients. So two patients might have different cancers and different tumors, but they're also different. They're different in age, they're different in overall health, they're different in genetics. And so all of these things create a lot of variability. And it means, what it means in general is that it's elusive, it's now I think there's a general recognition in the community that we're never going to find one treatment to treat all patients, and that precision medicine, so basically finding the right treatment for the right patient, is the future of care for cancer. And cancer is, I would say, one of the most advanced therapeutic areas in really understanding this precision medicine, but we're seeing this concept expand to other therapeutic areas where similarly we have heterogeneity between patients and we need to adapt the treatment protocol to each individual patient. And so this is where diagnostics come into play, because the role that diagnostics play is to find the match between a particular patient and the treatment that is best adapted to them, to their makeup and their disease. So unfortunately, there are still several barriers that are keeping us from developing efficient diagnostics for precision medicine and precision oncology. The first is that what we've seen is that patient subgroups are actually relatively small. So for example, if we look at breast cancer, we can find some alterations that are highly treatable, but that are only present in 1 or 2% of patients. So that means that out of 100 patients that you see, that an oncologist might see, there might be one patient that could be a candidate for a slam dunk drug that will, in fact, have a good impact on their overall outcome. And so screening for those patients becomes relatively expensive, because you need to screen 100 patients to find the one. And you can multiply this times the number of subcategories that you have of each cancer. And the fact that today a lot of the screening methods are still relatively expensive. There are some tests that can be relatively cheap, that can be a few euros, but we also have tests today that cost several thousand euros per patient. And so we can easily imagine that rolling those out across the entire patient population is not actually feasible in practice. And so the fact that these subgroups are all individually relatively rare and that the screening methods are still very expensive are limiting some innovations from actually getting to their patients. So the drugs exist. We know that a certain fraction of patients will respond, but it's making that match, finding those patients that can benefit from the drug, which is still very difficult. The second kind of hurdle is that several of these diagnostics require specific human and rare expertise to run them. And so if we're talking about a cutting-edge cancer care center, for example, they will have the experts in-house to do this. But this expertise will not be available to all patients across an entire country. So this also makes it difficult to have the right treatment for all patients across an entire population. And finally, unfortunately, in some cases, the right diagnostics don't even exist yet. So it's not even a question of a price or of an expertise. The tests the efficient tests currently don't exist. So at Oaken, we wondered, how can AI help in making all of this better? And a lot of companies are also working on this. And what's interesting is that most cancer diagnostics and a lot of diagnostics in general use images. And the richest of these images are pathology images. So pathology images are basically biopsies or resected tumor pieces that are visualized on glass slides under a microscope, but that as of about a dozen years ago can now be digitized. And so a digitized pathology image is actually a lot of information in one picture. Each slide is about 2 gigabytes of data, so that's about as much information as a full-length feature film. And currently, pathologists have routinely just a couple of minutes to scan through those slides and make their conclusions. And so this means that today there's a general consensus across the community, even within pathologists, that there's a lot of information in those images that's currently not being exploited. So, and The good thing is here is that most image diagnostics come down to classification. So on the left, you have a classification task of classifying between blueberry muffins and chihuahuas. And the same, there's a picture of a pathology slides. The same can be used for pathology slides. So for example, identifying patients that will respond to drug A versus patients that will not respond to drug A. Supervised machine learning, which is on images, which is greatly developed in the past years, is very good at doing this. So learning from examples. So what we've seen in the past about 5 to 7 years is a lot of groundbreaking publications in really the top journals: Nature Medicine, Nature Communications, ASCO, publications coming out one by several research groups showing that AI for digital pathology can actually do a lot more than we even imagined it could do. So first, what these papers and these studies have shown is that these AI solutions can assist pathologists in the tasks they routinely perform. So what they routinely perform is, for example, tumor detection, tumor grading, cell counting. And so the promise of this technology is to make the analysis of these images faster. And so this allows for the promise of screening more and more patients in more and more subgroups, but saving time. Also more cost-effective, obviously, because you're sparing pathologists time. You can make it better. So some of these tasks are actually more efficiently done by machines than by pathologists. Not that pathologists are not capable of doing them, but that these are very time-consuming and very tedious tasks. And so a machine obviously doesn't, care about spending time to really precisely, for example, count the proliferation rate of a particular tumor. And then finally, the most important of all, in my opinion, is that these AI solutions make this expertise accessible to all. So a lot of, for example, rare diagnostics are still in the hands of a few experts across a single country. So you'll have pathologists, for example, all across a particular country, sending their slides to the one expert to make sure that they got the accurate diagnosis. And setting up these networks is expensive and time-consuming, and they don't necessarily exist across all countries, across all patient subtypes. And importantly, beyond this, what these studies have shown in these past years, and what I think is the most exciting, is that AI can go beyond what the pathologist's eye can see. And so there have been studies that shown that from a digitized pathology image, AI can predict the presence of a genetic mutation. It can predict cancer outcomes. So patient basically survival can be predicted directly from those images, and response to treatment can be also predicted directly from these highly dimensional images. And so this shows that these AI-based tools have the promise to enhance precision medicine and diagnostics in an inexpensive and effective way, in a way that was never done before. So that's, I was going to say, a lot of promises, and the road to market is still very long. And currently, so this is just an overall roadmap of standard product development from idea, solution market readiness, market access, and finally, revenue. And a lot of for digital pathology, most products, the most advanced product are currently at the I would say FDA approval CE marking stage and are currently hitting the market. So the first products are now currently being rolled out. And it's exciting because we're seeing a lot of pathology labs starting to adapt their processes and go for more and more digitization to be ready to welcome these new technologies. So to give you a specific example, I don't know how much time I have left. 5 minutes. All right, I'm going to go relatively fast. This is a product that we've been developing at Oken on breast cancer. So the specific use case is for hormone receptor positive breast cancers, which make up about 65% of all breast cancers. So these are cancers with relatively good prognosis, with 90% of complete remission after the first round of treatment. However, 10% of patients relapse, and it's currently very difficult to identify early on who those 10% of patients will be. So clinicians, when they see an early stage hormone receptor positive patient coming in their door, they don't necessarily know if these patients are high-risk patients that are at very high risk of relapse, or if they're low-risk patients. And why this matters is that the treatment protocol is going to be different. For patients that are at very low risk of relapse, the current challenge is basically making their quality of life post-treatment as good as possible. So you may know that, for example, hormone receptor positive cancers, breast cancers, a lot of the long-term treatment is going to involve hormonal therapies. So basically very heavy hormonal treatments that are going to greatly impact a woman's life in the next 10 years after her initial treatment. Whereas for patients at a high risk of relapse, what's important is really having timely follow-ups, maybe more aggressive therapies from the beginning. And so basically being able to categorize these two categories of patients and give them treatments that are adapted to their particular tumors is very critical. So we built an AI model that, from basic clinical variables and the digitized pathology slide, can classify patients between high risk and low risk to better inform the treatment decision of oncologists. What we found, so not going to bore you with all the science, but basically that we were able to predict risk of relapse with performance that was on par, if not better, than current gold standard solutions, and also cheaper than molecular tests that exist out there. So I'm just going to skip here. The opportunities here is that the results are better than the current standard of care, and a lot of these new technologies that are rolling out are going to be better than the current standard of care. And for this particular use case, we found that 40% of patients who relapsed, in fact, did not receive chemo in the patient cohort, even though they had been classified as high risk by our model. So those are patients that should have been basically followed up with and treated more aggressively. And that also 25% of patients that had been classified by oncologists as low risk, but that were classified by our model as low risk, did in fact receive chemo, which means that they might actually have not benefited from that chemo and didn't need that additional treatment. All right.